Whatever I have learned throughout my journey, it was never a credit only to me. As a member of a community, first as a learner in school and university, among educators, some of whom I still hold so dearly to my heart, and to whom I owe so much of my lifelong learning journey. A teacher among my adorable learners, who I am sure have grown to be wonderful members in their own communities. An educator among colleagues and respectable leaders, who fully supported me during my self-exploration as a teacher. A director, and this is a part of my life that I highly value, because it gave me the opportunity to widen care and improvement, love and understanding, creating healthy communities, consciously dedicated to grow. The research I have done would have never been possible without those people, playing their life roles as I played mine. I am Manan Zainuddin, Global Education Consultant. Welcome to my podcast. This podcast serves to highlight education communities from macro and micro angles: leadership, learning, personal and professional growth. Stories, interviews, talks, projects, and more coming up from around this globe. Extending through this podcast Plutarch's famous quote that I had posted in all the places I have worked in: "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled." In this episode, I will be introducing O.R.B.I.T.S, O.R.B.I.T.S, an interdisciplinary through transdisciplinary approach that I have been using throughout my leadership stage, and the research that I have conducted in the past 10 plus years that led to O.R.B.I.T.S. Before I move deeply into this episode, I send genuine greetings of appreciation from the depth of my heart to all those I have just mentioned. A very special greeting goes to the last team I worked with as a director. Those educators made my 20-year-old journey worth all the reflection, planning, execution, and evaluation. They made me proud in the victorious moments. They made me smile amid the tears. They made me strong when I sometimes felt weak. Most importantly, through their outstanding learning capacity, passion for what they were doing, love emanating from their eyes as they hustled around, taking care of every child, caring about the concerns of every mother of a child, caring about each other as they hurried to substitute when a colleague was sick, working hand in hand, helping each other, meticulous about every detail in their instruction and assessment, and much more. As I speak now, I can picture this amazing group in my mind's eye and my heart's core, and I say, you have displayed self-leadership, and this proves your attributes as reliable, passionate, and true educators. Thank you. Why are those details important? Because every person in a school community, literally every person, no matter what the role is or how junior or senior his or her responsibility is, adds value to the process of learning and being. A school, as an educational realm, is not like any other institution. It involves children going through daily experiences and growing simultaneously, spending hours, long hours with their teachers and peers, and the case is not different now during online learning. Those who have listened to my previous 3 episodes may have built a background of how this approach started to come to light. I was immensely involved at all levels: mind, body, heart, and soul. That was obvious to me from the beginning, because as it all unfolded, and still is, education, educators, learners, learning, and content have been gaining more momentum towards the core of it all. This might sound philosophical, but it is about humans after all. Humans are complex beings, And schools are also responsible for that growth of those beings from childhood towards maturity, just like homes. So I started asking questions, and these questions were amazingly leading to more and more questions and inquiries. Needless to say, the questions asked earlier in my career lacked the depth that I embedded later in my questions. We grow wiser as we grow older. The questions evolved and more revelations marked the path as I utilized primary and secondary sources, qualitatively and quantitatively. The objectives of the entire process of researching were interesting because they were like the two sides of the same coin. The first was that there was a fertile ground to investigate and know more, not for the sake of knowing more, but for gaining consciousness of my world. And education has always been a fundamental, treasured part of my world. Phase 1 of my research had the observation mode, when a multitude of practices and routines caught my attention. This phase started from my first year joining a school in the year 2000 and lasted for 6 years. I was still a novice, and it was all limited to a teacher's view. But my character could not simply be content with everyday tasks and good results. As soon as I had my challenges as any typical new teacher settled, then I started living the experience, watching myself, my learners, colleagues, and the administration. Sporadic questions were emerging in my mind. What makes children excited in a classroom so they are fully engaged? Why do learners like teachers? And what would make a learner say, "I don't like my teacher"? How can we select and fully utilize the resources that we have so there are no neglected books, anthologies, audios, videos, hands-on material, IT materials, and others? Why do we write lesson plans? Why do we still improvise, despite our long hours preparing lesson plans? Do we truly care for our learners, or are we just there because we chose the profession and are naturally getting paid? Why did I act this way today, getting nervous in class? What made my reading class more dynamic today? Why do I and few teachers show enthusiasm for extracurricular activities while some others don't? Why is this colleague neglecting this learner? Why is this colleague abusing another colleague? Why did the director look unhappy today? Is it about me? How can I cope with this enormous school population compared to my previous one? And how are the leaders handling this 3,000 plus student school size? Why can't I feel organized when my onboarding has ended? Most of us love the school. What makes this school special? How can I understand the intricate structure of the school? How can I learn from others? Are all learners happy? Are all teachers happy? Are administrators happy? And the list is endless. Phase 2 was influenced by my professional and personal growth, and naturally it started to incorporate documentation. And this phase was critical because it witnessed me become a head of department, which involved leadership. Although it was still less than a senior leadership position, but I had the autonomy to investigate. And at a time when many questions were not yet answered and a multitude others emerging, I set sail into an investigation that I knew would turn to be empirical. I could not give in to the ubiquity of typical school days, piled up files in cabinets, and day-to-day pulls of concerns. Teaching routines were happening at their best. Weekly meetings, curriculum plans covered as per the standards, home assignments done, tests administered regularly, standardized tests, both American and British, fully practiced and successfully conducted. Almost everybody was satisfied because of those primary tasks being done. Learners were getting admission to the best universities in the world, and success story bulletin boards and yearbooks culminated all that. Reading between the lines of those typical days, I saw anxiety, overload, and dissatisfaction. Everyone was in the loop, including myself. I remember I started with simple observation logs for myself and all those around me. The targeted groups were the stakeholders and the shareholders. Stemming from my tendency to visualize information and analyze it, I was building my mind maps around so many questions. We are almost perfectly meeting the standards. The community is overall happy. Then where is the gap? We are following the same patterns. Why is that? How can everyone reach his or her full potential? What are we maximizing and what are we minimizing? What do we really need which might not be known to us? And many other questions. At a later stage, I extracted from my observations and mind maps keywords around which I designed assignments and surveys. Although they were done at a small scale, I reached very interesting results, sharing a few here. Curriculum is almost limited to the content within textbooks. The priority is given to score-based evaluations. Learners from all classes expressed lack of continuous creative engagement. Extracurricular activities were most of the time repeated. Teachers are dictated by the curriculum plans and have no time to extend to deeper learning experiences. Professional development is inconsistent. Administrators are fulfilling their duties and are content, but they are not much involved in their overall experiences. Parallel to my presence in the field, working in schools, I was speaking to many people from different countries, reading about hundreds of experiences, and adding to those observations and mind maps. I wanted to assess my process and results. The results were very similar in many cases. The reason behind this is that we are all human beings across those continents, going through very similar circumstances, giving birth to very similar experiences, and consequently adhering to the norms of our societies in almost all the fields. There was a constellation of factors contributing to those results. It is never only the school. Phase 3 was the most mature way of integrating all those facets through a more structured and evidence-based research. And it started quite early back in 2008, and it evolved gradually but amazingly through 2020. During that time, I was learning to collect data and conduct data analysis processes. As a director, it was tremendously accessible because the autonomy I had was much wider, and I could reach the entire school communities. The questions were deeper and more complicated as I directed my attention to every detail in the schools. How were these gaps first created and how do we reduce them? Can we even close them? What makes us leaders? How can we leaders strive to learn more about communities, including ourselves, and consequently make more effective plans? What associations are we making and how do we identify biases of judgment as we make decisions that would affect the entire community? Are we simply forecasting what we know instead of keeping records and monitoring them so that we know what steps to take? Are we truly preparing our learners for the future now that career requirements are not the same? How do teachers view their work and are they satisfied with their achievements? What type of professional development are we providing? And how can we switch off the default buttons so that we all move forward towards our highest good? To what extent are we monitoring diversity and equity? More extensively at this stage, I designed more assignments, questionnaires, and projects pertaining to keywords from my observations and mind maps. Along with those were the rigorous school improvement plans, the SIPs, that I was working on, and I usually do these as 5-year plans because this way a clear line of sight can be established with data taken from all disciplines. Throughout committees and quality management procedures, decisions are more informed because they are evidence-based, strategically designed, and goal-oriented. Using data and their corresponding tools from all those studies, there was a myriad of interesting findings. Sharing here just a few. 90% of the overall community were happy about the achievement. 85% believed they were exceeding requirements regarding university acceptance. 82% expressed excitement for learning new concepts and going through new experiences. 89 out of 143 met gifted and talented criteria. 94% considered their school communities happy. There was also a myriad of interesting findings that required redirection for improvement. Sharing here just a few. Those related to teachers. 88% of them reported that intervention plans were not always effective due to time restraints. 69% believe that more teaching and learning can be done in class than in doing paperwork, such as writing lengthy lesson plans. 34% believe that they are either underestimated or neglected. 76% said that professional and personal development is very limited and occasional. Those related to learners. 70% expressed their sadness because of long school days and less play and activities. 38% reported that bullying is not always noticed. 26% believe that they could do much more in school. 71% expressed that more counseling is needed. 78% said that they do not know much about their school statement and policies. 35% said that they feel that some practices are not fair or that they are disregarded or not given a chance. Testing ranged between 2 to 5 times every week. Those related to administrators. 44% expressed that tedious administrative work is not always compensated. 65% believe that they would need more attention from senior leadership. Those related to parents and guardians. 92% conveyed that they are highly satisfied with the achievement. 48% conveyed that they were not being progressively addressed. 72% expressed that school can be better, mainly regarding extracurricular activities. It is important to note that my plans for improvement were going side by side with my research. I don't know how I did that actually. I neither studied leadership nor taken courses about it. I just did that out of intuition and reasoning, a blend of the two, mainly because I wanted to do what I saw fair and considerate for everyone and everything. I was in charge and the communities counted on me. My character supported all that. I am an excellent listener and speaker. I listen and speak from the heart, can easily understand the person in front of me, a child or adult. I can easily act, especially in critical situations. I can predict incidents, which is not difficult when we know the society and culture we live in. Most importantly, I always wanted the school communities I worked in to be like home, encompassing care and love, but requiring commitment and responsibility. I am proud to say that we established a very healthy climate and culture, still aligned to standards and Ministry of Education requirements. We received a very high score for assuring quality education, as stated by the accreditation organization. I was leading from inside out, and my team was in harmony and learned to do that as well. Now that I am a global education consultant who strives for conscious leadership and learning communities, sum this in O.R.B.I.T.S, O.R.B.I.T.S, a transdisciplinary approach that is a synergy of fundamental factors needed in every educational institution: cognitive, metacognitive, social, emotional, and more. It is my method now in assisting national and international schools to develop a conceptual version that meets their identity and secures their standards. O.R.B.I.T.S, O.R.B.I.T.S, is an acronym of 6 phrases. O stands for Own Your Way, involving the entire community in the process of sustainability and improvement at its highest possible expression revives tremendous opportunities for full engagement from the stakeholders. When I was a director My team knew every detail in the curriculum, instruction, and assessment processes. I wanted them to be integral parts in what is being done, just like me. Needless to say, nothing of what I have done could have been possible without them. We all worked as a team. I did so much of the planning based on the evidence on ground, but their voices were central to all that. Viewpoints, suggestions, ideas, projects, reflection and discussion, action and feedback were paramount. That created a sense of ownership. It was not the school, it was my school, it was their school. We owned what we did. When one owns something he or she likes, he or she would do whatever it takes, not only to keep it, but also to cherish it. R stands for Raise Your Standards. This is very simple. Education is about learning, and learning is about growing. And growing cannot exist with mundane, repetitious effort. Our world is rapidly evolving, and we are responsible for fostering that rapid growth. I never settled for what I already knew, and never wanted the learning communities I worked in to settle for the known and the familiar. We were always experimenting and initiating methodologies, not for competitive reasons, but for challenging ourselves. It is only through challenges that people grow, aiming for the stars, taking higher steps on the ladder, thinking big. B stands for Believe in Your Assets. This takes two paths. The first is identifying assets in the school community. And assets are primarily human and secondarily resources and facilities. The second path is trusting that they embody strength and agility. This may sound easy at first consideration, but in reality, it is not easy for many leaders and school community members to do so. My journey as a school planning developer was mainly focused on those assets, myself included. Nothing can be done without those driving forces, change agents. These are school community members. In other words, not leaders, not teachers, not learners, not parents, but all of those together, working in a campus with resources and facilities. It is the belief that every one of those members is reliable and special in the way he or she performs his or her tasks. And this belief must be well communicated so all stakeholders know their worth and the worth of the resources they have. Rationally speaking, it is not always as glamorous as it might seem. It is never a utopia. Not all members display the best they can and should. Leadership here can decipher who is truly an asset and who is not. The latter is the case of those who join schools but refrain from admitting the need for professional growth and who might not respect the school community in a way or another. These are very few, and naturally they are advised to find another field which they can better benefit. I stands for Integrate Your Mind and Positive Emotion in the general learning process. This is very interesting because I did that without prior knowledge, out of intuition, and it was superb. I always felt and believed that our purpose in this life extends to eating, sleeping, graduating, and finding a job. It is much more than that. It is about the experiment among humans as social, emotional, conscious beings, fulfilling different life purposes, each reaching full potential and creating wealthy communities. Wealth of thoughts, ideas, loving and caring feelings, invigorating voices, multifaceted resources. The only way to live that is through our energy field, connecting the mind and heart so that we do not accumulate or at least learn to unlearn our emotions and memories. Later, I searched to back this up with science, and I discovered neuroscience. It was sheer astonishment. I was so happy that I was a director tuning in as much as I could to that energy field in myself and in those around me. Coherence, as they call it. This is so complex because such processes are slow, especially in big communities, blocked and sometimes resisted by others, but when it is done in a simplified manner, the way I did that, it can be very helpful. Like mentioned before, this is not utopia. We live in a complicated, norm-centered, programmed societies, but I always say that even if 1 out of 20 responds, then it is worth it. Conscious presence and understanding of our complexities can bridge the gaps. Education has its depth, its roots, and out of it, humanity stems in its most beautiful expression. This is an area that will solidify my lifelong plan for education from a totally different perspective. T stands for Tailor to your needs and aspirations. Now, one of the stress triggers in school communities is competitiveness, and unfortunately, it is poorly understood that every school is unique and should have its own identity. The requirements and criteria for quality education are the same worldwide, as we are all speaking about 21st century education and sustainability development goals. However, there are governing factors in every educational organizations, and only through rigorous data analysis can these be detected. Improvement necessitates 2 quintessential elements: what calls for fixing and mending schools' needs, what calls for reaching higher levels, schools' aspirations, 2 ends of the same spectrum. The 5-year improvement plans that I worked on tailored to both, because focusing on one means neglecting the other, and neglecting one means imbalance and distortion of the school statement. S stands for Spot and Solve Your Problems Practically. Now, this is deeply connected to authenticity. Schools show successful stories and data stories, immense satisfaction through their environments, and it is true. Most educators and leaders worldwide are doing their best to endorse learning, and recently burnishing learning experiences with social emotional focus, targeting well-being of learners and teachers. I find this outstanding. However, there remain problems that continue to be invisible, and this requires expertise to detect and solve in a practical manner. Knowing how to dig deep into schools' infrastructures can provide those hints necessary for what I call invisible ripples. As a leader, I always tended to seek the deep and the quick-witted rather than the lengthy and the slow, especially during serious matters and time restraints. However, this is very critical because it necessitates a keen eye and a wise approach. It demands agility, efficacy, and well-designed and well-timed intervention. Like mentioned, my plans for improvement were going side by side with my research. Positive results were unfolding as I took a new step further or redirected a step. It was amazing. Almost all the data recorded regarding learners, teachers, leaders, and parents showed remarkable progress. Needless to say, there were areas that were very challenging and even few that were not yet solved, such as policy mandates, parents' conflicts, time restraints. But showing continuous progress and most importantly, a conscious, responsible, energetic community sums it all. Thank you for taking time to listen to this episode. You can find much more on my website. For resources, www.orbitsdevelopment.com/resources. For the blog, www.orbitsdevelopment.com/blog. Please feel free to check them and subscribe to my monthly newsletter. My newsletters are issued once every month, are complimentary, do not target any sale pitches, and any monetary returns in any way. I truly respect my subscribers and genuinely respect their time and capacity, especially during this fast-paced world. I do not like to have a heavy-laden inbox or popping messages every few days, and I care not to load my subscribers' inboxes as well. I hope you have benefited from my O.R.B.I.T.S approach, and you find it useful in your communities. The acronym even has an element of serendipity, as it matched with the theme I always related to education: space. Education is as vast as space. It is endless, infinite, and forever intriguing. True education brings peace and wisdom, just like the silence and wisdom of space. If you like, please feel free to check the programs page for full descriptions: www.orbitsdevelopment.com/programs, and discover whether they can be of benefit to you, to your educational institution. One of the programs is Transdisciplinary Track, a threefold data-driven study methodology that can help schools connect their vision and mission to their Department of Education requirements and international standards, including accreditation and quality assurance. Transdisciplinary Track Key Performance Indicators layout can be adapted to any system of education around the world. The second program is Quality Consulting, another study methodology that can help school leaders build their 5-year SIP plans, school improvement plans. They are customizable, globally oriented, and target quality management in unison with international schools accreditation organizations and protocols. The third one is Climate and Culture for Schools. This helps schools build a healthy, creative climate and culture, because without that, improvement cannot be sustained and authentic learning and innovation cannot be reached. It is about leadership empowerment and transformation, staff engagement and growth mindset, and school statement blueprint. Climate and Culture for Schools is mainly about soft factors and how they can be channeled wisely towards a more balanced and thriving school community. The fourth one is Orbit Mode. This is one of my favorites, as it is mainly about well-being, not in the wide-known criteria. It is very closely related to energy-based experiences and assists in finding retreats amid all the hustle. All these programs are offered through O.R.B.I.T.S approach, O.R.B.I.T.S. I would love if you stay tuned for the upcoming episode. I will be hosting my first guest, a very special guest, in the field of primary and special education. Stay tuned! Until next time, let us keep this open-ended and drop a question for all of us to ponder. What is one aspect mentioned in this episode that, if done, could have made you a less stressful, more dynamic, and more thriving learner or educator?